everyone. Thanks for joining. Got a little bit of a lag here, so I apologize for that. So do bear with us as you have questions and folks start to join. I know we've got, sorry for that dead space there. It's a bit distracting the way the the lag is taking place there. So I apologize for that. I see we've got a couple folks that have joined already, and thanks for being here. I see, oh, Kristen just joined. I know you said you had some corporate housing questions, so thanks for tuning in here. And apologies that there is a little bit of a lag. Apologize for that. That's my bad Wi-Fi. But do go ahead and put your questions into the chat and or in the comments, I should say, and we would love to get those answered for you. Hello. This is the first week we'll be doing this. Want to test it out and see how that works for everyone. We've had a lot of folks in the community and beyond that have expressed interest in getting some questions answered about corporate housing. So just wanted to open this space up and see what the specific questions are that people have. I know I did have some questions recently about what people can do to fill vacancies, which is a really common question. As far as our company works, mine and Tigger's company, Turnkey Corporate Housing, the way that we function is we keep properties in our database, and whenever we have housing requests, we will go ahead and match properties in our database with those requests and use those as our first choice. But then we'll go beyond if we don't have anything to fulfill those specific requests. But beyond that, we always recommend that people place their properties other different locations. Don't rely strictly on our database and our housing requests to fill those vacancies. So, some of the common places we see people putting their properties is just, of course, Zillow is a big one. So you see that there are always rental properties there, but you can actually specifically note that it's for a short-term rental for a month, that it's a furnished rental. So it gives you a lot of flexibility for how you do that. And it may be a little counterintuitive, but we do also recommend Airbnb. Airbnb actually has a corporate housing division specifically, and you can set up properties for a 30-day stay as a minimum. In fact, I have properties that I have had listed in that way in the past, particularly if you have a property in an area where there are those requirements that they don't allow short-term rentals, but they allow mid-term rentals. So don't shy away from using Airbnb just because it is that kind of minimum. You can absolutely still use Airbnb, and we tend to get quite a few bookings that way. So let's see here. I see Kristen just asked if I can share a bit about my story. Sure. Actually, my background is kind of interesting and different than most in this space. I know there is a lot of buzz around midterm rentals these days. I first got started in the space in 1997, which is something you don't hear very often, but I actually spent 10 years in the hospitality industry that was mostly between Disney, Hilton Hotels, and Intercontinental Hotels Group. But while I was working on my master's degree, I needed to take a break from those hotel business hours. And so I actually went into temporary housing for a few years. It was a great experience. I was with a company called Bridge Street Accommodations that doesn't exist anymore. So I was only in the space for a couple of years and went back into hospitality and never expected that I would be back in the space again. But I ended up kind of re-entering the space in 2022. I personally had first started um, in, as an investor in 2014. At that time, I had just a short-term rental, and really that was all I had for quite some time. And then later, when I sold that property and did a 1031 exchange, split it into a couple of other properties. At that time, I was still just short term and long term, actually. But then in 2022 is when I re entered the midterm rental space, corporate housing. Um, I really just got started, like a lot of people do, with primarily focused on insurance housing at that time. But then I have expanded well beyond that. Insurance housing is something that is really consistent. Unfortunately, sadly enough, that there will always be claims. We can't necessarily predict where these things will happen, and that's one of the things that can be a little bit tricky. Is don't really know exactly when someone's going to have a fire or a pipe burst or whatever the case may be. Now, there are certainly other contributors to the space that are more predictable, like relocation for different companies. There are relocation management companies that handle mobile accounts. So there are definitely other pieces of the business that are more predictable. But what we found is that really building strong relationships with those major clients that we work with is where the bulk of our business comes from today. We are also branching into government. We have actually been set up as a vendor on SAM.gov for a number of months now, but we're in the process of being added to the GSA schedule, which is even a higher level with that government business that we foresee coming down the pike. I do see that Alex is joined us, so everybody, please welcome Alex, who's our new business development team member who's joined us. He's actually based in North Carolina and is going to be covering that geography. We've got a couple of others that will be joining and or have joined, will be covering other areas as well. So we do also have someone that will be covering Texas and the Dallas area specifically. And we're looking at expanding to some other key markets as well with what we're doing there. So I see a wave there from Alex. Thank you very much. So as far as getting started in this space, there are a lot of questions that people have around furnishings, around choosing a location, things like that. Um, Thinking about choosing a location, the traditional wisdom is more that you want to focus on major employers, you look at economic development data, you have a certain population density that you want to look for. One of the things that I always like to look for specifically is an intersection of major highways so that there's ease of access from different directions. But I always headquarters at hospitals and hotels. Those are leading indicators. Hotels in particular can be really interesting to look at. So when you think about suite hotel brands, if they're in a particular location, rest assured that there's been a lot of research done justifying the need in that space. So those are some of the things that we tend to look for, and it's worked out quite well. There's an approach that I've taken in the past that I know a lot of others in the space do as well, which is maybe counterintuitive, which is clustering properties. And the reason that that works out really well is because once you've built strong relationships with employers and others in a particular area, what will happen is if you only have one property in that area, it will be full, and it might be full for months at a time, which is a good thing. But then you find yourself turning away other business. And so the approach that I've taken at different times is when that happens, if we're consistently getting demand again and again, just to add another property close by. Um, in our case, what we started off with in 2022 when first getting back into the space was with single family homes. But since then, we've expanded to apartments as well. So you just have to think about the different personas that you're serving with your own particular business. Sometimes there's differences in what people are looking for. If you're thinking about primarily focusing on relocation insurance, and so families, we find about 70% of stays tend to have pets. So things like fully fenced backyards are super, super important. So I always go for properties that have a fully fenced backyard whenever possible. So there are definitely a lot of, things like that as far as criteria. Parking is another thing to think about. Again, depending on the type of property and the location. Some locations it's less important than others. And another thing is that as we are finding more and more work through the construction business, which is a lot of what our business development team is working, and it's a little bit counterintuitive when it comes to parking, in that most people are looking for, especially here in Chicago, a garage just to not have to dig their car out when it's snowing. But for construction work, a lot of times they have a big truck that will not fit in a traditional garage. So there are all kinds of little quirks like that that you want to think about as you're starting to fill properties. Would love to have any other questions that anyone has. And so definitely feel free to just go into the comments with questions. But thinking about some of the frequently asked questions that we do get. A lot of questions that we tend to get around specific areas that, should I buy a midterm rental property in specific areas, which is really hard to answer if it's not an area that we've actively worked in the past. There are a lot of data sources that are out there where you can, go and research and find those things. But in reality, what we found to be the best test is just to put a trial property in an area where we think, for one reason or another, that we want to test out a location. For example, we recently put a property in Philadelphia and found that there's quite a bit of demand consistently. There are a lot of hospitals and universities that are in close proximity. And so one thing that I always like to do, other than getting a property on Airbnb, when that demand starts coming to you, and of course list the properties with our major clients, most of which have databases where you can submit properties, but also is to set it up on Furnished Finder, which can be counterintuitive depending on the size of the property. The reason I like to do that is because then you do start to get requests that come through for that area. So that helps give that proof of concept, seeing what's coming through. Another thing that we just tested out, just kind of dipped our toe in the water recently, is doing room by room. And that's a way that, if you are, having a particular property that's struggling for one reason or another, if you just want to get it filled, I've found that getting that room by room setup really helps get business coming in right away. There are a lot of different places that you can do that. Of course, you can't do it on Airbnb, you can't do it on Furnished Finder. One that is often overlooked, and it's kind of interesting, is Facebook Marketplace, but you can absolutely list properties there. And I have not had as much success there, but I do get inquiries, and I think a lot of it just depends on the profile of the property, that kind of thing. So definitely, trends that we tend to see depending on who the persona is, who is, looking for the housing request. So those are a few things that come to mind as far as kind of some of the frequently asked questions that we tend to get. Another thing that comes to mind as well is talking about furnishing setup. When I first got into the space again in 2022, I was going with the approach of buying furniture. Of course, that's a big hit when you're first setting up a property, just getting it fully furnished, regardless of how you do it. That's a pretty significant startup investment in addition to, all the other expenses that go along with getting a property up and running. One of the things that we shifted to doing more recently is, especially depending on the specs and the details, is to work with rental furniture. And that, of course, depends on where it's located, because it is harder to do in smaller areas and markets. But the idea there is, especially if you're doing a new setup for a specific client, which is something that we're doing more and more, uh, there's a lot of expenses with buying the furniture aside from purchase itself, but having someone to do setup, to deliver. Once you tear the property down, then there's the loading, the moving expense, and then storage as well. So particularly if we're kind of testing out a new market, that approach of going with rental furnishings is something that we've been doing more. And you can also get pretty shrewd with what you're doing and exactly what's included. So thinking about, who you would be catering to is another thing. So for example, um, there are a few different rental furniture proper or companies that we work with, and they have a different checklist that they do for government bookings because they may go with one nightstand instead of two, just less frills typically to help manage the overall expense. So, just to kind of getting into that habit um, of really looking at everything that you're including in a property. And I know I myself have definitely been guilty of a little bit of overkill, particularly when it comes to housewares. Maybe I've included extra things like a crock pot that maybe are not really necessary, but I know people appreciate those things. So it's sometimes the devil is in the details. So that's just another kind of set of things to think about. Another thing that comes to mind is also when you're thinking about who you're expecting to house in a particular property is some of the finishes. So, for example, if it's a corporate relocation, a consultant, someone like that, they're looking for finishes that are more similar to a hotel with white linens. But if you're housing a construction crew, you probably don't want white linens. So just thinking about things like that. So uh, we kind of keep on in inventory white linens as well as gray linens. And then we will sometimes make changes to a property from a decor perspective or change out beds. We have some specific bed frames that we use that are portable and easy to work with. And, depending on the specific needs of a family or of a particular housing request, maybe we'll put a queen most of the time, but if they have two kids sharing a bedroom and need two friends, then we can easily accommodate that because who would want to turn down a 6 month booking just because you need a bed that's a couple $100? So think about doing things like that to really cater to the particular clientele that you have. Another thing that people talk about a lot, and I've actually got some things in the works on this right now, is for insurance. You definitely want to be sure that you have yourself well protected from an insurance perspective, even if it is a property that you're just renting. So thinking about general liability, errors and omissions. So there's some trickiness to that and hoping to have some better solutions on that soon. At the moment, though, what we utilize is a TAPCO policy that is actually written through farmers on a state by state basis, and I have had really good luck with that. So, working on something a little more extensive, and hopefully, we'll have some other updates to share on that soon. But also, anyone that's here, definitely feel free to join into the comments and let us know if you have other things to recommend there or ideas that might be helpful to everyone joining. So let's see. Other than the insurance piece, other let's think. I guess another thing that I have found to be really successful is depending on the specifics and where the municipality is, um, if you have the ability to rent for less than 30 days, that's a great way to help optimize occupancy if you have small gaps in between. But another thing that I do find sometimes when property owners or operators are kind of dipping their toe into the water for midterm rental is that if you have been using a property as a short-term rental, you have to kind of plan ahead and block out the calendar because I've had a number of times where I've had folks that have been in our database that I would have loved to have given them a booking, but they've got 2 or 3 or 4 short-term rentals coming up that are a couple nights here, a couple nights there. So in cases like that, they miss the opportunity of a several months long booking, and those are all decisions that we make as operators. But just something to think about that if you are interested in shifting from short term to midterm, to go ahead and put a block on your calendar. Choose that point where you want to start, really wherever the last booking is, but then go ahead and block it off for future bookings so that you will have that open availability, which I know can be pretty scary, especially for people operating in the midterm or in the short term rental space. To actually block your calendar off is definitely a scary thing to do. But if you give yourself a little bit of runway in doing that, then you can go ahead and start marketing the property 30 to 60 days ahead of that, if not more. And so when you think about like the relocation management companies, sometimes you'll see that there's certain seasonality that comes into play. If there's an executive that's going to be moving, it might be the mother or the father, or whoever the one is that's relocating with the company, might be moving on their own to begin with, and then the rest of the family's coming after school's out in May or June, things like that. So don't be afraid to go ahead and market a property months in advance, and just let your top clients know that it's out there. Mm, shoot, I have another one and totally lost it there. Okay. So, as far as other questions that we hear about a lot, I think that people just ask about how to market a midterm rental, and it's much like any other rental in that you really need to look at your surrounding area and really, just do some local marketing. Who are the employers? What are the big projects that are going on? Where might consultants be coming from? What are the hospitals that are close by? So I know I myself have traditionally not hosted a lot of travel medical professionals because of the larger properties. 3 bedrooms and up generally is what we've had until recently. But you can also find that you have travel medical professionals that are roommates that are working together, or even roommates for that are close to college campuses. I have one property in Lake County that's close to a medical school, and actually in the unit next door, there are 3 medical students there now, and that's something that we're thinking about for going forward and making it flexible to accommodate those types of stays. So um, lots of things that are always evolving in this space. But again, just love to have anything in comments that if there are specific questions that folks want to have answered, we want to make sure and answer those. I know I see them, in different Facebook groups and, just conversations place within the community, things like that. So we definitely want to be a resource and provide value. And hopefully, if we're not able to get your questions answered here today, feel free to reach out via messages, and always happy to follow up that way and try to provide value and help out. So we're a little under half an hour today for our first office hours. I hope you guys have found this to be helpful. Looking forward to continuing this tradition and see where this goes. So if you do have any specific topics that you want to see covered, please let us know, and we will see you next time. Thanks so much for joining.